President Jacob Zuma starts a two-day state visit to Nigeria tomorrow. And of course, this is to talk about relations with the West African powerhouse. And they've been rather uneasy over the past few years. And President Zuma will be looking to improve political and economic ties. Let's cross over to our reporter, Sophia Adengo. She's there in Abuja and, of course, going to be following this particular visit by our president and the Nigerian president. Sophia, let's talk about relations between the two countries, because when you look at how, I suppose, these, let's just call them soured relations began, there seems to be a series of events that led up to this. But, you know, in saying they are soured relations, is this the sense that you're getting in Nigeria as well, that this is a bit of a, we need to build up this relationship again with this visit?
Leanne, if you look at the past, relationship that Nigeria has had with South Africa, I suppose, one could say, that there was a breakdown in communication, especially with former President Goodluck Jonathan's administration and the South African government in many instances, especially when it comes to a controversial arms deal in which Nigerian, authorities, military authorities were detained in South Africa, over monies that, was considered questionable by the South African government. And I think perhaps maybe that's really where politically and, security-wise, both governments began to, I suppose, question what intentions they had in terms of this arms deal. And I suppose, that rift perhaps grew over the last 3 years and culminated in South Africa, the biggest foreign investor here in Nigeria, taking about 60% of the share in the telecoms community, really being confronted by the Nigerian government over breaches of security. So there has been, back and forth politically and in terms of business and the business climate, where you have seen, a sort of rocky relationship. But, it is a new leadership here in Nigeria with President Muhammad Buhari. And, we need to underscore that the visit by Jacob Zuma this time around was an extension of an invitation from the office and administration of President Buhari. So obviously, one can easily assume that, the relationship has moved from being rocky and soured to perhaps cordial and open, especially when you look at the nature and the delegation with which President Jacob Zuma is coming to Nigeria with, a whole spectrum of leaders and policymakers, really hoping to address the various issues with which perhaps South Africa and Nigeria have had question marks in the area of security, and more so, as we have seen very publicly, in the area of business and foreign investment here in Nigeria. Yeah. So, Leanne, that's where that would stand.
Yeah, there certainly is. I mean, and I know you did speak about the fact that this all started during the presidency of your former president, Goodluck Jonathan, there in Nigeria. I mean, there was even a moment when the High Commissioner to Nigeria here in South Africa was recalled. There were a lot of rumors that the recalling was perhaps as of a result of the xenophobic killings here in South Africa, which a lot of Nigerians were unfortunately falling victim to. That, of course, was just speculation. We're not too sure about that. But that was, again, another sign that relations were very tense between the two. But now there's a new president in. But, I mean, if we talk of relations now, since the removal, the moving out of Goodluck Jonathan, has there been an improvement? Because it certainly doesn't seem that way, specifically with regard to businesses.
Well, at this point, what happens is you have, embassies within both countries, South Africa and Nigeria, who are really, adamant on opening up not only, trade communication, but also opening up political dialogue with the aim of de-escalating any perceived, feelings of distancing or segregation of any sort. And, lately in the business sector, especially with South African Airways opening up more routes routes to Nigeria, the implication there is that perhaps there should be more movement, and that is being encouraged by both governments. This particular visit by President Jacob Zuma here in Nigeria is to solidify the union between these two powerhouses, as you've called them, Leanne, especially in the area of economics. We know that Nigeria and South Africa have a major domino effect, not only within their own regions, but in the continent in terms of moving goods, moving trade, and also import and export volumes that have amounted to almost $1 billion. So those type of things cannot be ignored. And at the end of the day, it is hoped that during visits like this, in which both presidents and both leaders can come together and sort of iron out any issues. With regard to doing business in Nigeria, it's not only South Africa that has stepped forward and said perhaps the climate needs to be improved. And maybe this is the feedback that is required by the Nigerian government to make the necessary adjustments to improve trade relations between not only other African countries, but especially with a powerhouse economy like South Africa's.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the answer that I was looking for. I mean, we've got to understand that South Africa has the greatest share of businesses that are operating in Nigeria, and a lot of people are saying, you can't actually take it too personally as bad relations between the two countries, but because South Africa has got such a large presence, that is the reason why we're seeing a lot more enforcement on there. And it's perhaps the now president, Muhammad Buhari's way of actually cleaning up business and making business work more effectively and efficiently and above board. And that's what some analysts are saying. So, I mean, can we accept that as a good reason?
Well, Leanne, I think that is the most positive outlook. If indeed there was a rift, and if the rift were growing, it would be unlikely that the two presidents would be meeting, especially on Nigerian turf, so to speak. But the fact that both presidents have come out openly and said that they do depend on one another, especially with the economies, facing the crisis that they have. South Africa, especially having passed its budget with the economic minister reading and going through some of the upheavals that South Africa's economy has been going through in terms of especially trying to diversify. Nigeria would be the destination, especially when it comes to large volumes of commodity exports with which South Africa depends. And with Nigeria, South Africa is definitely a market in terms of expanding technologies and looking for expertise, as you will, that South Africa has to offer. So there is this symbiotic relationship that you have spoken of in great depth that, perhaps maybe, any differences can be considered, water under the bridge, so to speak, Leanne.
Yeah. Let's also look at some of the delegation that's coming with our president. It's a huge delegation, and a lot of ministers are being represented. I mean, just the two that I'm going to mention is our defense minister. She will be present during this visit, and again, that brings into question the kind of relations that we could be seeing developing between the two countries with regard to defense, and also home affairs. Home affairs is coming on this trip as well, and I know there's been a lot of talk from the Nigerians as to the visa restrictions coming into South Africa. Many complaining that they only ever get 3 months, and yet they are wanting more. And they're offering South Africans more, and yet on our side, we're only giving 3 months. So those are just two ministers, and I know that there is going to be a bigger delegation going along. But these are just some issues that, again, I imagine are hoped to be resolved.
Well, Leanne, this is really the reason of the two minds coming together and the two leadership, representing their governments in terms of readdressing. When the Binational Commission was formed, this body that helps to, harness both the positives in both these countries, immigration was one of the 21 articles that was tabled along with other policies in terms of trade. And immigration was brought up because there were indeed, feedback not only from Nigerian nationals, but also South African nationals in terms of what is perceived on paper and what is perceived in real life. And so this perhaps would provide an opportunity with the representation not only of President Jacob Zuma, but of, these ministers and really addressing the areas, especially of home affairs, of foreign affairs, of defense and security, in fine-tuning some of these articles of understanding or memoranda that were put through this binational commission that could indeed translate into practical, experiences from one Nigerian to another or from one South African to another, which is really the aim of these talks, because at a policy level, these policies must be rolled out. And according to analysts, that is really what needs to be addressed here. Leanne?
Yeah. I just want to go back, and I'm really now going back a little bit, because it's another issue that South Africans were very devastated by. And that, of course, was the collapsing of the church of TB Joshua, where 84 South Africans were killed during this. This was another issue that I know hampered the relations between the two countries, and the fact that the bodies were brought back and the officials were not allowed to see them, and we waited such a long time to get these bodies back. Do you think at all this will be spoken about, the investigation into the collapse, whether there'll be closure or not? I mean, I'm really taking a chance, because I can imagine this is something you may not know too much about, but I think a lot of South Africans are hoping that maybe some answers will come out of this visit.
Yes, it's a multi-layered issue, Leanne. TB Joshua's collapse of his church, was, I guess you would say, non-profit work or private business really melding together with the public and melding together with government. TB Joshua, as we speak, is still being arraigned in court to answer over the charges of that collapsed building and why it was that he allowed so many people into a structure that was not perhaps, suitable for that number of people, especially with a sensitive community like the South African delegation that was under his care. So the Nigerian government has constantly stepped in and said that they would do everything they possibly could in terms of cooperating with South African government and in terms of treating the matter with dignity. What we do know so far is that TB Joshua, as of 4 months ago, was asked to, appear in court, of which he did not appear, and is still working out the fine details of exactly what happened within the judicial system. But the Nigerian government has continuously committed to making sure that all the information that is required is put forth in addressing the TB Joshua collapse and really providing as much information as possible. Of course, loopholes absolutely have existed in terms of communication gaps and providing the families with, a detailed account of what went on, which perhaps maybe rests on the account of TB Joshua and his camp. So, of course, this is an ongoing investigation. It's quite unfortunate that so much time has gone by without necessarily having gotten some sense of closure, not only from the Nigerian government. So it would be more than sensitive, if not necessary, for the delegation coming to really address the key issue of the TB Joshua and who, at the end of the day, would be held accountable, not only for the lives lost generally that day from all the people around Africa, but especially addressing the South African lives that were also, met the demise at the church. Leanne?
We leave it there, Sophia. This is a face you better get used to, South Africa. We're going to be seeing it quite a bit. Sophia Adengo reporting to us on a state visit, and a lot of media calling it the kiss and make up visit by our state president, and a lot of ministers as well. I mean, we're talking about so many ministers going with this on this visit. We've got our international relations and cooperation minister going with, defense ministries going with, trade and industry, home affairs minister, minister of energy, and of course the minister of mineral resources as well is going with, as well as a big business delegation. So that's what's happening.